Welcome to Mama Tusa, Conversations with a Midwife. I'm your host, Atusa Benji. A quick note before today's episode. This show talks about birth, life, death, and all the complexities in between. My goal is always to share stories that leave you feeling empowered, but please know that some topics may be challenging or deeply moving. Also, while I'm an experienced midwife, I'm not your midwife, and the information on this podcast is not intended to be medical advice. Please consult your healthcare provider when considering what is best for you as an individual. Now, without further ado, I hope you enjoy the show. Hey everyone, I'm so excited for today's episode of the Mama Tusa podcast. I had a great conversation with my guest, Faith Freeman, who is a mama and a very experienced educator and licensed midwife, owner of Mind Body Birth in Los Angeles. We talked about her own experiences, what led her to midwifery as a young woman. We talked about her birth and how you have to take off your midwife hat when you're having a baby yourself. Or maybe not. And we also talked about her work as an educator and preceptor to so many aspiring midwives here in Los Angeles. If you want to support the show, make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube or give us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcast. If you want to stay in touch, check me out on Instagram or Substack, links in the description. And now here's my conversation with Faith Freeman. My conversation today is with Faith Freeman, who is just so close and dear to my heart, like many of my guests. Faith is a mama, she is a midwife, she is an educator, she's a mentor and a friend and a business owner. She owns a birth center in downtown LA. She does both community births in the out-of-hospital setting, in the home birth setting, and in the birth center setting. You're going to love her. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for making time. You're a mommy, you're a business owner, you're a midwife. Mm-hmm. I know your phone is on right over there, close to mine.
Yep.
Because we get called out, even in the middle of podcasts. Exactly. That can happen. Yes. What was the funniest place you ever got called out?
There's a lot of those. I've definitely been called out from like roller skating before, in the middle of concerts, out on dates for sure.
Yeah. And anything with your kid? Have you missed a birthday party yet?
Oh, yes. I haven't missed hers because we've moved it, but yes, she's 8 years old and I've had 3 births on her birthday in the last 8 years.
It's a conspiracy.
I know. It seems like it every year.
Hannah has not forgiven me. I think I wasn't at her maybe 11th. She's 23 next week. She still
remembers that.
Yes, like remember that time that you weren't there at my birthday, which might actually happen again next week. But we shall see. We shall see. Yeah. I met you just before the pandemic. I think it was like 2018, 2019. You were working at Graceful Birth Center. Does those dates sound pretty accurate?
Yes, that sounds accurate.
And I was in midwifery school and doing my numbers and getting all my births. And at some point, the preceptor I was working with said, listen, my volume's a little low right now. You might want to work with another midwife because it's good to work with another midwife and learn different ways to do things, but it's also good for you to see more volume. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, okay. So I heard about this awesome midwife, Faith, who was, you were kind of new to the neighborhood,
I had
right?
just come to LA in 2018. Yeah.
From Oklahoma. And you had been a practicing midwife over there for many years. Mm-hmm. And you came in and started working at Graceful, which was a birth center. It closed a few months ago, but Graceful had a pretty good run over there in Silver Lake under Elizabeth Bachner. And I called you and I was like, hey, can I come see you? And I remember I went to see you and we were sitting on that birth bed and talking and you were like, yeah, it should be okay. Let's get started. And then volume went down.
Yes.
And you had to make a switch too. Mm-hmm. And I think at that time you were thinking about starting your own practice.
Yes.
And then that wouldn't have had a lot of volume because you would have been brand new. So we sort of pivoted, which I was heartbroken about, but I knew that the universe sort of knew what I needed to learn from who. Mm-hmm. And you're still a trusted mentor. And I really do have a very special place in my heart for you. So thank you for always guiding me and for always just saying yes and being there. It's always fun to hang out. How did you get started in midwifery? Tell me about your early years, where you were born, your family.
Well, thank you again so much for having me and for bringing up the first time we met. I can't believe it. Wow, 2018.
It's a long time ago,
Yeah. So I'm originally from Oklahoma, and I'm the oldest of many children. My mom had 10 children, and she had a really rough birth with me. And so I really think my midwifery journey started with my own birth, because after my mom had me in a hospital setting, she was like, I can never give birth like that again. She knew she wanted many children, and she really needed a different experience. With my sister, after me, she waited until the very end, almost ended up having her in the elevator.
Yeah.
And then with her third, she had a midwife in the hospital, and still just didn't feel like she had as much autonomy and as many options as she really wanted to have. And so after that, she gave birth 7 times at home with various different midwives. So,
Wow.
yeah, so I grew up going to prenatals with her. I saw a lot of different ways her midwives cared for her with herbal, remedies and nutrition. I was never present during one of her births, but I was in the house, and she would always tell us her birth stories on all of my siblings' birthdays. So then later on in life, when I was looking to, see what I was going to do, there's a lot of circumstances surrounding it, but I ended up in midwifery, and here I am today, 20 years later.
It's so interesting you tell that story, because I wonder if my mother's birth story started my interest in midwifery, because very similarly, my grandmother gave birth in a hospital in Iran, in Tehran, back in the day. I think this was probably in the 40s. And she hated every waking second of it.
Right.
So when she had her second pregnancy, she decided she's going to go last minute. She's like, I'm not going to be there for hours and be on my back and la, 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 la. So my mother was born in the doorway between the house and the outside pavement. So they basically just neighbors just put a little sheet curtain situation around her, and she just delivered her second baby there.
Wow.
And she talks about, and this is all mystical, but midwives are mystical people, right? She talks about how her head was in the house and her body was outside of the house. So my mom was literally born in between the doorway. Interestingly, my mother died very young and very suddenly, and she died in a doorway with her head inside and her body outside.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, I wonder what that was all about. Because, midwives believe birth and death, and it's all the same veil, just different exit, different entrance, all sort of intertwined. But it's so interesting that they had that story. And your mom probably, her first was born, in the 80s?
Yes.
So I guess not much change between Oklahoma 1980 and Tehran 1940.
Not at all.
Kind of similar, similar, pushing people into positions they didn't want to be in and not have many options. So you watched your mommy have, not necessarily at the births, but you watched her have prenatal care, and you were infatuated, you were interested, you knew you wanted to do it.
It was more of just a part of life growing up. Birth was all around us and our mom having babies. And then also we lived on a homestead. So I was long before I ever even thought about being a midwife. I was delivering baby goats. We were having chicks. We had calves. So, learning about it in that way, which is obviously a whole other world.
Wow. I actually have a friend from midwifery school who has homestead also in Washington, rural Washington. And she's like, oh, yeah, the goat gave birth last night. And, she carries Pitocin and, sometimes has to help them. And it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, no, before anything, like I said, around midwifery school, I had gloved up and gone in there and because they will get all tangled up, if there's 2 or 3
they have so many legs.
Kids, you have to get up there and get them untangled so they can be born.
That's wild. Literally.
Yep.
Literally wild.
Literally wild.
Literally wild. So how old were you when you said you wanted to start midwifery school?
Yeah, so I was around 21, I believe, 21, 22.
And the family was all for it?
Yes. I was raised in a really restrictive religious group that I don't really associate with anymore. And there was, I really loved growing up with my siblings and the closeness that we had, but I wasn't really a fan of the restrictions around women. So I wasn't really allowed to pursue my interests at the time. And so, having conversations with my dad, who was, with that religion, we were having to get everything run through our parents and getting their approval. So one of the things they finally approved was me becoming a midwife. So that's how my journey started, interestingly enough.
Because it was more like a women-focused...
It was a women-focused career.
That works mostly with women, essentially.
Yes, and I wouldn't have to go to school with males or go to like a non-religious school, things like that. So it was approved, and I was able to pursue that.
So where did you do your training?
So I trained mostly in Texas. Like I said, I'm originally from Oklahoma, but at that time there was very few midwives in Oklahoma, surprisingly enough, with the culture there. And they were very territorial. So they wouldn't take any students. So I had to go,
right?
Yes, so unnecessary. I went down to Texas. I did a mail order academic program, because this was in the early 2000s. So that was my academics. I did about a year and a half, and then again had to get approval from my parents and was able to work at a birth center, well-known birth center, the very first birth center founded in modern history after, everything was shut down, as we know, with midwives back in the turn of the century. So in the early 80s, Texas was one of the front-running states on bringing back midwifery.
Wow,
so
I didn't know it was Texas.
Yeah, Texas is a really incredible state for midwives, and they've had licensure, one of the longest states to have licensure and really good licensure. So I was at that birth center that was in Grand Prairie at the time. It's since closed down, which was really sad, but it had a really long run. So I had a few incredible preceptors there. There was other students, really amazing situation there. And then I was back and forth from that birth center for several months, then took a break, and then at the end of my training was at another birth center in El Paso, Texas, and finished my training there. But then when I graduated, I had all my numbers, I had all my training. There was a lot going on with my family. My parents had split up at the time, so I didn't take my NARM right away. I actually didn't take it till almost 2 years later, and then took that, got my CPM, knew I was going to be on my own. So I was in Oklahoma, like I said, not a lot of support. And it had been, close to 2 years since I'd finished my training. And also some of my training, especially in the El Paso location, was very much like you walked in, caught a baby, and not a lot of
hours and hours of labor management.
Learning and making sure you really had the skills you needed to have. Yeah. So through a long series of events, I had made contact with a midwife in Israel from a previous trip there with my family, and she and I had been in contact. And so I had reached out to her because I wanted to get out of the States. I wanted to get out of just the bubble that I had been in for so long with my family. I was leaving that cult. And she allowed me to come, and she was my mentor for almost a year. I lived with her. She had been doing births. She was in her 60s at the time and had been doing births for over 30 years, both hospital and home birth. She had been one of the leading midwives to get home birth restarted in Israel.
In Jerusalem?
In Jerusalem and outside of Tel Aviv. So we went literally all over, a lot of Palestinian clients, a lot of Israeli clients, and a lot of expats too. And I really, because she was a very, very hands-off, skilled midwife. So it was a great shift from the really hands-on, a lot more aggressive approach from my last apprenticeship. And I just was back into that midwifery, true midwifery care. So I really am so grateful for that. And then when I moved back to Oklahoma after that, went into practice. And I actually qualified as a preceptor right away because I'd had my CPM for 3 years at that time, had done over 35 births, which were the requirements for a preceptor. And so
right away you started teaching?
Right away I had 2 students.
What was some of the wildest stuff you saw in those early years?
I mean, just a lot of people giving birth so far from hospitals, people having, their 7th, their 9th, their 12th baby. I've had a mom and her oldest daughter pregnant at the same time at each other's births, delivering a few weeks apart.
Yeah, that sometimes happens. I remember I had one birth where the client delivered and then her mom showed up with her baby, which was the client's sister, and they were just breastfeeding together.
Exactly.
So sweet. Well, I think a lot of women have their babies so young that by the time their oldest has a baby, they're like barely 40.
Exactly.
And still having babies,
Yep.
especially in more religious communities for sure. So what was now different? What were you seeing from your training in the States versus this other midwife who was internationally trained? What do you mean about hands-off versus hands-on? Because they always say like a good midwife knows when to put her hands together and sit on the chair.
Exactly.
Even though sometimes you're like grinding your hands so hard, they're going to bleed, but you're still being patient and not doing anything. Tell me a little bit about that difference.
Yeah, so I think the biggest differences I noticed was the last person I had worked with, like everyone delivered in McRoberts, like on the bed. We did mostly directed pushing. Because it was a birth center that was focused on students, they would just bring all these people in the room that the client didn't know, and they weren't really asking for consent for a lot of the things that they were doing or explaining things to the clients in the way that I would want to. And we didn't have an option to do water birth. It was just a lot of rush. Like if we could get them in and out faster by like holding back a cervix and having them push, that's what we were instructed to do. Going back, and there was no relationship built with the clients. You know, it was a clinic and you just had who came in on your shift and those types of things. So I value it for learning how to manage emergencies because of the type of care that was given. We did have a lot of hemorrhages. We had resuscitations.
Interesting. There's a correlation between rushing labor and the body being like, really? You made me do that? Well, here's the price tab.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So I was grateful for that, but I wanted to get back into, you know, that informed consent, that relationship building, and then allowing labor to progress as labor should progress back into water birth. So the midwife was doing midwifery, you know, listening to heart tones, taking blood pressures, guiding them as needed, but not putting her fingers inside every time someone needed a push, you know, guiding people to feel inside their own bodies and see if they could feel the baby moving down, and guiding the client to catch her own baby or the partner to catch if they wanted to, and waiting on the placenta. We still, of course, had the normal things that will come up. We still had the occasional hemorrhage or the occasional shoulder, but handled in a way that was appropriate and not for the convenience of the midwife or to just get things done easier or quicker.
And for the listener, by the way, whenever you're talking to a midwife who's explaining a birth scenario, it's so funny. We all have like universal hand movements. So I held the cervix back, or I checked her and she was 6. We have all these like hand movements that are kind of universal.
Exactly.
Talk to me about holding a cervix back. What is that for? And is it useful? Is it dangerous? In what scenario is it appropriate?
Yeah, so sometimes we have different scenarios that could cause a cervix that despite waiting, despite giving as much time as you can, that cervix is just not moving out of the way. Experiences I've had is maybe if we have a compound presentation, which is typically a hand up somewhere by the face, it's tipping that head just slightly where there's a gap where that cervix can come through, or the way that the head is presenting, part of that cervix can keep slipping through. Sometimes it'll be requested by a client because they really want to be done and they want to hurry. Sometimes we have some heart tones that are not sounding as optimal as they should. And it's always if you can get the baby out sooner than waiting to get to a hospital, sometimes that would be the call because it's safer for the baby to be born sooner than later. So those would be some reasons. So that cervix is what we call kind of a lip. It's slipping down in front of the head. So when someone's pushing, it's holding back the baby and not allowing it to descend. So a midwife can, with consent, slide her fingers inside and slip that cervix back so that when the client is pushing, the baby's able to pass by.
And it's always anterior lip, right? It's always like, because it's in relation to that pubic bone that sort of gets in the way. So sometimes people ask, what does a lip mean? Basically, that means you're trying to get this very hard, very long cervix that is closed to open up and thin out to 10 centimeters, which is approximately the diameter of a baby's head in an anterior position. Now, once in a while, as the cervix is opening up, it gets kind of like locked up at the pubic bone. So you end up having this anterior lip. And I remember as a student, I was like, how come you never have a posterior lip? How come you never have a lateral lip? It's always at the top, but it's in relation to that darn pubic bone which is so inconvenient.
Yes.
The pubic bone is so inconvenient when it comes to labor because it lodges the bladder, in between itself and the uterus, and then it can actually make the cervix not completely do its job depending on the position's head. So if you're wondering what an anterior lip is, it's basically like 9.5 centimeters, where the client is like 10 centimeters all around, but a little piece is still pending. That little piece can actually be so firm that it never moves, and you end up transferring just for that lip, so that the client has to get an epidural or, has to have a surgical birth just because that wouldn't, and it stinks because they've done all of this work. Did you find episiotomies to be different in terms of how they were done, when they were done?
Thankfully, the birth center that I worked at did not do a lot of episiotomies, so I didn't have to see that. But, episiotomies, thankfully, are very rare in midwifery care.
Thank God. Tell me about your birth.
So it's funny you were just talking about anterior lips, because I had one during my birth, and I actually was able to hold it back myself.
Wow.
And it was less painful. But anyways.
That's crazy. Love. Yeah, and it makes total sense. I mean, you know your body and you know how to hold it back. So it's just the other way around because you're doing it to yourself.
Yeah. No, I'm like feel so lucky about my birth experience. I'm so grateful because it was such a full circle moment. My two midwives were actually midwives that had trained with me in previous years. Aww. And were obviously graduated and on their own with their own practices, but just one of them, we'd been friends since childhood. I delivered all her babies up to that point. The other one, I had been her midwife for one of her babies. And then also my doula / chiropractor, I had been her midwife. She was one of my first clients ever. And then my photographer had been one of my previous clients.
Oh my goodness.
And then there was a second photographer, videographer there who had been a doula for some of my clients. So, I went into labor surprisingly, totally unexpected. I was working until about 36 weeks. So I had delivered babies all throughout my pregnancy. I had a couple really advanced students, and I really wanted them to get their numbers because I didn't want my pregnancy to impact all of their, years of training and, getting right close to the end. So when I had realized I was pregnant, I mostly just took repeat clients and multips. So I had a few primes, but they were mostly repeats and multips because obviously those births tend to be a little bit easier. And then I had 2 advanced students. So I wasn't doing as much at the births. I was obviously still working, but so I was supposed to go off call at 36 weeks. And I was thinking I'll have a month to myself to prepare for my birth and labor and do all the things.
Said she.
And at 36 weeks and 3 days, I wake up at like 5:30 in the morning with contractions. And I was like, surely this is just, I don't know.
Braxton Hicks.
Yeah. And nope, it wouldn't go away. I got in the bath. I took some magnesium and all the things and threw it all up and kept having contractions.
Oh, gosh.
So I let my team know, and licensure in Oklahoma at that time was not in place. So we didn't have any legal parameters around 37, like needing to be 37 weeks to birth outside the hospital. And I had done 36 weeks from even when I was in training as a student in Texas. They'd had it from 36 weeks. Now it's switched to 37.
Yeah, California it's 37 to 42
California
also.
Yes. So, but I had always done 36 weeks since that had been my training, and I'd always had good outcomes. So my team was all comfortable with me staying home. So I labored at home for about 12 hours until about 5:36 that evening. I checked myself a few times, and then one of my midwives had come through and checked me. So I think I was about 5 or so when they all came through around 5:30 that evening. I think the thing that stood out to me the most when I was in labor was I knew it was going to be hard, and I knew I was going to know what was going on, but I didn't expect to feel it emotionally as much as I did, because I'm a very logical person. Like, everything kind of happens in my logical brain. And my contractions started off really close together. Like I didn't get the 20 minutes apart, 15 minutes apart, 10 minutes apart.
You didn't get the childbirth education graphic.
I got 3 to 4 minutes apart from the jump. And like, I was just trying to like, I'm being like such a wimp and I'm just in early labor, like get it together. So it was great. I labored. My team was there. I was moving all around. I was like, surely if I change positions again, this will help. It didn't. So in and out of the tub, in and out of the shower, in and on and off the toilet. And then I remember, because my favorite number has always been 17, and I was in labor, and it was going to be the 17th after midnight. And this was maybe like 8 p.m. And I was like, as much as I like 17, I do not want to wait for tomorrow for that to be her birthday. 16 is fine
for today. Thank you
16
very much.
is fine. That'll be my new favorite number. But she waited. And I'm really, it was so interesting. People are like, oh, did you have a midwife? Did you deliver your own baby? And like I said, I did hold back the cervix a little bit, but it was amazing to just be the client, honestly. Like my midwives did everything. And of course, supporting me and taking care of heart tones and vitals and all of that. And I was just making it through those contractions one at a time. And then I do really feel like my knowledge and skills as a midwife helped when it came to the pushing aspect, because she was coming. We suspected a hand. We had that lip. And I could tell right away when a position wasn't working anymore. So like switching between all the positions during pushing. I think I still pushed around 2 hours, I think, maybe a little more. But I'm fairly confident it would have been longer if it hadn't been for like, I could tell. And my midwives too, but she took her time coming out, and then she finally made it. And then she was out in my arms. I was never happier in my life. Aww. And I started having just like a very unexpected, like massive hemorrhage. Oof. My midwives are doing all the things, calling 911 and giving me meds and bimanual compression. My placenta came out right away, but then just my bleeding would not resolve. Wow. So they did everything amazingly. And by the time EMS arrived about 10 minutes later, all was well. I bled almost 2,000 cc's in less than 10 minutes.
What did they give you? Just as this is for the listeners and the viewers, we do carry anti-hemorrhagic. So what did they give you that saved your life?
So they gave me Pitocin. They gave me a misoprostol. They did bimanual compression, which is a hand inside and a hand outside, just giving...
Holding the uterus
Holding
down.
the uterus, giving a massage to help it clamp down and close, which is how the bleeding should stop and how it stops. And then one of my midwives started an IV right away, so I was getting fluids at the same time. And then they also gave me some essential oils. So heliochrysum can sometimes help with bleeding. I also took herbs. And we're just chatting. They were really, really a little bit, they told me later too, like they were so scared. Didn't show at all. I was not scared whatsoever. I was like, it's fine, you guys. It's going to be fine. I knew I had trained them well, for one thing.
That is wild.
But yeah, the EMS arrived, like fire and EMS, and there was a whole bunch of people there. But by that time, 100% stable, not bleeding at all. And one of the firefighters came in. She took my vitals, and I signed AMA, like, I'm great. You guys, thank you so much. And they headed out, and I stayed in my bed.
And you knew the protocol to get your levels back up because you're a very talented herbalist. Tell me about herbalism.
Yeah, so just...
which not all midwives are, by the way. We all have different niches. Some of us are educators. Some of us are herbalists. Some of us are chiropractors and all sorts of things. But I know you have a lot of training in that.
Yeah. So back to when my mom was seeing her various midwives, a few of her midwives had really specialized in herbs and plant medicine, and I had seen how much it had benefited her. So it was something some of my preceptors knew a little bit about, so I had learned from them, and then I did a lot of self-study and other courses after I became a midwife. And then also the population I served in Oklahoma at the time really wanted to avoid anti-hemorrhagic medications if at all possible.
For religious beliefs?
For religious and just, personal preferences. So carrying a lot of different herbal blends and teas and tinctures to stop bleeding, to also encourage contractions with different types of labor patterns. And then a lot of herbal protocols I use in pregnancy around like hypertension, preeclampsia, like of course, very, very early on.
Right.
not even
You're not treating it in labor.
We're not treating it in
Right.
labor. We're not treating it once it's a critical level.
Right.
But if we're creeping, if we're still in range, but we're creeping, or if we have labs that are still in range, but again, reaching the edges of normal.
Yeah.
So those would be protocols I have to help reverse possible preeclampsia creeping in or possible HELP syndrome, so certain blend of herbs for if our platelets are lowering or if our blood pressure is creeping, things for glucose, stabilization, a lot around iron and hemoglobin levels, ferritin
Nature
levels
does
as
very
well.
with having the right thing for
It
our
takes
blood
time and
support.
dedication.
For sure. I mean,
Yeah.
a shot of PIT is, faster than the way a tincture works, but it doesn't mean the tincture doesn't work.
Exactly.
We talk about being called to midwifery and how our life shapes our decision to become a midwife. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about that for me? What drew you to stay in it? Mm-hmm. You didn't have to stay in it. What keeps you in it?
I think midwifery is such a needed profession. We all know that the outcomes in our country are not great for birth and for birthing people, and especially for people of color and those disenfranchised in different ways. So for me, I'm obviously a white woman and have a lot of privilege, but I also experienced poverty as a child, and then coming out of a cult, I think it helped me to see how much we can support each other. I wouldn't have made it out without the support of other people. And midwifery really empowered me in a lot of ways to get out of that cult that I was raised in, and also open my eyes to help others in as many ways as I can. So for me, midwifery is a calling that maybe came to me in a way that I wouldn't have chosen. And I really, really love teaching. So actually, the way I put myself through midwifery school was teaching music. So I taught out of my parents' house for many years, just church music and children, other homeschooled families in the area. My sisters and I all taught music. So we had this whole thriving little music school in the middle of the country.
The vocals or instrument? What was your...
Mostly instruments, yeah. Piano, violin, a little bit of guitar.
So sweet.
A lot of hymns and fiddle music and bluegrass styles. So when I became a midwife, started teaching other midwives and have always had students as a part of my practice. And I was counting it up the other day I can't remember why. And I've trained over 20 midwives now.
Wow. That's incredible. Imagine that ripple effect of they will go on and train others and train others and train others. And I know that as a trainer, I train doulas, and some of my most beautiful moments are when people send me a picture of their certification or a thank you letter. My student just sent me a thank you letter that she got helping someone have a VBAC, and she was so thrilled. She took a picture. She was like, look. So I think Penny Simkin told me one time, she said that when you're someone's midwife, you're helping one person at a time in a big, big way.
Yeah.
When you're someone's educator, you're helping someone in a smaller way, but the ripple effect is bigger. Mm-hmm. And I always hold that. So one is not better than the other. They're just helping the world differently. So education is something I love.
Yeah.
How did you know you had to get out of that cult?
I was really unhappy, and all the things that it was promising, if you follow this, if you do that, you'll be happy, have peace, you'll be fulfilled. And that was not my experience. So that was one of the biggest reasons. And then the second was just seeing the abuse that it caused, and even raised in it, and you being told over and over, this is how it should be. And these people have brought these consequences on themselves. There's that truth in us that that's not right, and that people shouldn't be treated in that way. And so those were the things for sure that helped me be I don't want to live like this, and I don't want to treat people this way.
And all the babies that come into your hands with peace and love and care. It's I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. You're so incredible, really incredible. What made you open up the birth center, Mind Body Birth LA? Tell me all about your practice.
Yeah, so I was doing home birth after I had been at Graceful, and I went back into home birth. The pandemic happened 3 weeks after I restarted a home birth practice. I was like, oh my gosh. So running all over LA, had my daughter, with me. We had moved here to Los Angeles from Oklahoma when she was 5 months old. I did not want to raise her in Oklahoma. I was really ready to leave, and it was a good time for me to make the change.
Yeah. And you were on your own at that time?
I was on my own. It was me and her. I'm so grateful. Just so happened, one of my dear client families from Oklahoma had moved to LA just recently before I had. So I ended up here under less optimal circumstances than I had planned. And they opened their home to me, and I lived with them for the first 6 months I was here in LA getting my license. And it was just like an incredible miracle and blessing. So incredibly grateful for them. So yes, I was practicing doing home birth. And when you're at someone's home for a long birth, and then you have to go right to clinic, and then you have to go to your home visit, and then someone else goes into labor. And I was just missing so much time with my daughter, and I would barely see her sometimes. So that was a driving force. And then as a preceptor, like I've said, and training different midwives, I've seen when you graduate as a midwife, there's very few places where you can just go and get hired on. You have to set up a whole business and start all these accounts. And it's like, you can't just be a midwife. You also have to do all these business things. That can be a struggle.
For sure.
And we are all just out there by ourselves. So my vision was to open a space where I could have my daughter with me at work more easily, and we could be together more easily. And then where at some point I could bring in other midwives and new midwives, or just midwives that could be in community with each other and not all have to reinvent the wheel separately.
Yeah, I think part of the difficulty in being a midwife, especially in LA, is the sustainability of it.
Yes.
As we were talking about that, we had lunch earlier. There's the financial sustainability, which is one side of it, but the other side of it is the emotional sustainability of practicing on your own. And even if you have a dear friend or a colleague or a mentor who can come in and help, or a really qualified assist, you're still responsible, and your phone never leaves your hip. Ever, ever, ever. I mean, in the shower, mine sits outside the shower door. And then that, going to a long birth, and then having charting, and then if there's a transfer, and how you're received at the hospital, and, and the collaboration piece is coming together. Like now, thank God I have a few doctors who collaborate with me, and there's always a very easy exchange of, this is what's going on, what do you think? And they trust me and I trust them. But I feel like many midwives don't have that in many parts of the world, and we continue to be marginalized. It's fascinating that the oldest profession, I mean, it's either midwifery or prostitution, right? There's always an argument about that. It's still so like, well, why would anyone do that?
Despite all of the evidence showing benefits and the safety.
Absolutely. It's mind-boggling. And also the marginalization between us.
Yes.
Like the best way to break apart a marginalized group, divide between them. So divide even between midwives with territorialism, or this license, or this is better, or that's better, or the way that you practice better. I mean, I talk to midwives all the time that are like, I did midwifery, I was exhausted, I got sick, or I had to get divorced, or my kids hated me, or
I know.
Whatever it was, because it's so difficult.
It's
very difficult to stay in. What keeps you in?
I know my clients for sure, like just the joy of working with them, my students as well. And it's how I, keep a roof over my head for me and my daughter. So that's pretty good motivation.
Absolutely. Yeah, I once asked this writer, he was a screenwriter. I was like, how do you get creative? Like, what if one day you don't want to write? Like, how do you do that? He's like, the days I don't want to write, I usually think about my mortgage and my kids' tuition. And all of a sudden I get really creative.
Exactly.
There is something to sustaining your family for sure.
Exactly.
What is your self-care, come back to me ritual after a long birth or a hard birth? And also, how do you separate yourself from the client's experience?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, it can be hard to separate yourself from the client experience, or to not take it personally if you couldn't get their birth to be what they wanted. It's definitely become easier over the years, but it's still something that you grieve with every client that even has a good outcome, of course, but that needed to transfer, just had a really difficult birth. I think processing it with them and helping them to understand, and explaining to them everything you did try and everything they worked so hard for, and how the baby sometimes tell us they just need a little bit different type of help and a different type of birth. So processing it with them. I think also the education piece also always comes back in, because I can't graduate my students if they haven't seen some complications. So, at least it feels like there's some more meaning behind complications. That's one more thing checked off for that student midwife to know how to manage those different types of scenarios. For me, just coming home, I have a wonderful sister who lives with me, and she's like my full-time nanny. So she's like my co-parent for sure. She's the fun parent.
Gift,
And so when my daughter's not with me at the birth center, she's home with my sister, and they're playing video games and not doing the dishes.
Yes.
So, for me coming home and just being home and, picking up and getting in bed and having a good cuddle is usually most of what I need. I'm not too difficult to please.
Love.
Once in a while, we'll drive to the beach and watch the sunset.
Can you tell me, and as we're getting ready to wrap, tell me an incredible birth story.
Oh, wow.
Like an empowering, redemptive, where the ones where you leave and you feel like the clouds of glory have opened and you're just walking in line with everything good.
I had a fun one lately where we had a first-time client who had come into care a little bit later, and she's so lovely, and she just really jumped in with both feet and got it together. And she was laboring, and things hadn't been going on for too long, and then her partner calls me, and I could tell she was really laboring, and he was like, I think we should come in, and she thinks we shouldn't because it hasn't been the typical time frames. Yep. And I could hear her, and I was like, oh yes, please come, I'm headed that way. And sure enough, she gets to the birth center. We have this amazing valet because we are in downtown LA, and everyone's always a little bit unsure about a birth center in downtown. And I'm like, you just have to come. It's beautiful. We have incredible staff at the building. So you pull underground into valet.
And the building itself, it's like an old bank building, right?
It's an old, stunning, beautiful building with marble everywhere and frescoes and pillars. So I could hear, I was getting off the elevator with the wheelchair, and I heard them pull in, and I was like, oh, we're going to have our first baby in valet today.
Love, yeah.
I'm like, I'm sure it's going to happen at some point. Tonight's the night. We didn't. She finished the contraction. She got in the wheelchair. We got up into the birth center, and she had the baby just a few minutes later. But it was just like a funny thought. I was like, I think we're going to have a baby in valet today.
Baby. Yeah.
Which I'm sure the valet team is so lovely. They get to know all of our families, and then they get the biggest grins on their faces when we bring the babies down afterwards.
It works.
Yes,
it's a thing.
Exactly.
It's a thing. I caught a baby at the valet one time. Which was so much fun and such a strange day. Yeah, our first interview, she was a second-time mom, and her first baby had been a shoulder dystocia, and she was afraid to have her baby at home, even though she really wanted a home birth. So she calls me. She's like, hey, I just left my doctor's office, and the doctor thinks it'll be today. And I was like, well, how does the doctor know? But okay, call me. And she's like, yeah, I'm just kind of cramping. No big deal. I'll call you. And then she calls me, and she's like, yeah, they're getting stronger. I was like, it's your second baby. Why don't I come? So I get there, and her husband calls. He's like, are you coming? And I was like, I'm just a minute away. Like, it was, all the way on the west side. I get there, I pull in, I can hear her. And I was like, okay. So I just listened to the baby to make sure the baby sounds good. I don't check her because for what? We're going to the hospital anyway. And I was like, well, either you're having your baby here or we got to go. And she's like, all right, let's go. So we get in the car and we get to the hospital. And the line for the valet was very long.
Oh, no.
And he had a Tesla, which I didn't know how to drive. He's like, I'll park. You guys go in. So I was like, okay. So he waited in the valet. We start going up. As I get her out of the car, she won't walk. She's like, I can't walk. I'm like, okay, babe, either you're going to have your baby here or you're going to get in a wheelchair. Like, there's two options. She's like, well, here. I was like, okay. I said, can I pull down your pants? And she looks at me like, duh. Later she said, I can't even believe you asked me that. But I was like, did you think I was going to pull down your pants
in the middle of valet?
People standing with their tickets, like with their mouth open. And I was like, can we please get a doctor? Can you call a nurse? Can you call L&D? But because she was so relaxed, no one sort of computed what was happening. So they never called. And I ended up catching her baby by the little pillar. Her husband, because we were behind the pillar, missed it. So he walked right past us. He walks into L&D. He's like, my wife is here. Like, she was pushing. And they were like, sir, are you at the right hospital? And he was like, yes, I'm at the right hospital. Where's my wife? He comes out and meets us in the elevator where I put the baby inside her little pajama top and closed it. A little do-gooder person gave us his sweater, put it over her, and the baby was great. It was really a beautiful day. What has been your experience with transfers to the hospital, knowing that you have a birth center in that area? And where do you transfer to?
So emergently, we've had really good care with Los Angeles General. Okay. It's pretty close. Good Samaritan Hospital is the closest. California is second closest. But I think because Los Angeles General is a lot higher level hospital with a great NICU, and they can get us there really quick. Via EMS. So we've been mostly taken there, and we've had really lovely care. The staff has pretty much always let me in. You always have a little bit crazy transfer stories from time to time. We had one time where the team was really delaying the care, and the lead paramedic was not being friendly whatsoever. But thankfully everything ended up being okay. We made it to the hospital in time. It was a very critical case and all was well. But we did call the fire chief and we filed a complaint. And they must have talked to him, because he came back with another transfer after that. And he was all, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. What did you say, ma'am? Whatever you say, ma'am. And I was so grateful. Yeah. And it was very, very smooth transfer. We do try and travel, which is not super close to the birth center, but without traffic and the 110, our clients can typically get to Martin Luther King Community Hospital in the Compton area pretty easily. And we do like to transfer to that hospital if possible for non-emergency transfers. So clients who are completely safe, just fatigued, maybe need a little support. And they have a lot of midwives on their team, and I know some of them personally, and they've usually taken really good care of our clients. So we also go many other places because, of course, it's also based on clients' insurance and preferences. So I really try and develop some rapport when I call to give report ahead of time. I always have transfer paperwork I send with my clients and faxing all their records. So obviously it's not a guarantee, but I really feel like you can do everything you can to build those bridges and help the team know that the people coming in are safe. Like I always like to let them know they're not getting a train wreck. They're not getting someone off the middle of nowhere with no care, that everything has been done. And we know this is a safe situation. So that way they're not coming
their nervous system
with their nervous system at, high alert.
The first thing I do when I meet the first person is they've had prenatal care. The vitals are stable. This is what we're here for. And she's term. And usually they're like, okay.
This is okay.
Like they bring it comes down a notch, which is so important. In closing, can you fill out the following 2 sentences for me? Number 1, I would tell a person who wants to become a midwife, blank.
It's a wonderful, wonderful way to work, but also, look into all of the aspects that it encompasses and make sure you really, really want to do it, because you have to love it.
And I would tell someone who is considering midwifery care in a community setting, blank.
It's a wonderful way to give birth, but are you ready to work for it?
Oh, what does that mean?
You have to put in a lot more work prenatally. Most people, need to be their healthiest selves. So you can't just come in and leave. We need to double check everything and look in depth and help you be your healthiest self. And then in labor, it's very hard work to have a baby. It's incredible how much we have to work for every little baby that's born. And it's a wonderful, empowering experience, but most people don't glide through labor. We
dig deep.
Yep, you dig very, very deep, and you get down to the core of your being.
Yeah. Love. I just love you so much. I love having
you too.
on.
Thank you so
Tell
much.
us where we can find Mind Body Birth LA.
Yeah, you can find us in downtown Los Angeles. We are on Instagram, on the web, of course, on Google and Yelp. We do birth, we do preconception, we do intrauterine insemination, we do fertility counseling, also helping to partner with other providers and resource you around the city for things that aren't my expertise. Yeah.
Amazing. Faith Freeman, look her up. She's an angel. Thanks for being my guest.
Thank you for having me.
What an amazing conversation I had with Faith Freeman. So many interesting topics we touched on. I loved hearing about her own labor and delivery experience, loved hearing about how she got into birth work, and was also so inspired to hear about the work she does with aspiring midwives. We need more Faith Freemans in the world for sure. That's it for this week. Thanks to Faith Freeman for coming on the show. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to support Mama Tusa, be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube, and make sure to check out my newsletter, Mama Tusa Monthly. Mama Tusa is hosted by me, Atusa Benji, and produced and edited by Josh Stretton Carlson. Our theme music is composed by Mehri Lalazarian. If you'd like to support the show, please follow and review us on Spotify and Apple, or subscribe and like us on YouTube. This show is for informational purposes only and is not intended to be medical advice. Always consult with your healthcare provider when making medical decisions. See you next Tuesday.